Welcome to the LinguaFolio Café for Tuesday, January the 12th. We have a lot to share with you today, so let's get started. First, we want you to know that this is one of 4 of our LinguaFolio Cafes. These are quarterly broadcasts. They feature guest panelists and speakers from across the state who are using LinguaFolio in their classrooms, K-12 and in different language learning environments. We have an hour together today, and they'll be answering some questions for you and having you ask questions and respond to those as well. We did start our year with the first LinguaFolio Cafe on October 13th, and the archives for that are posted. And we have 2 more coming up, one in March and one in May. Today's agenda is pretty simple and straightforward. We're going to start with a welcome and logistics with our control panels and some things like that. Then we'll introduce our guest speakers from around North Carolina, and then we'll just chat. They will have a chance to answer some of the questions, and then hear from you as well and find out what your questions are. And then we'll end with some reminders. Let's get started with our WebEx controls. When you logged in, you should have seen your WebEx control panel come up probably on the right-hand side of your screen. It usually is pictured that way. And then you see that there are several buttons you have that you can use throughout this broadcast. The first is the chat. You see that's a little dialogue bubble. And so you could probably find that. And as we had said, as we were setting up, be sure you send your chat messages or questions to either everyone or all panelists if you don't have an everyone drop-down menu. You can also raise your hand if you have something to say, although we would prefer you just jump right in and put something in the chat box and we can unmute you as needed. And then don't forget that your unmute button is next to your name as it shows there on the screen. So that's our control panel for today. To do a little bit of a test of the audio, please go ahead and raise your hand, your electronic hand, if you can hear me sharing this with you and your audio is working correctly. All right, I see slowly but surely hands are being raised. That's great. So remember, your control panel is yours to use, and we hope you'll be typing in questions and comments to share throughout our conversation today. With that, I'll turn it over to Sally to talk about Mentimeter.
Thank you. And Mentimeter is another tool that we're using today. We only have one poll, and we're going to run these through this polling poll. A tool that we have is you can use it in any device. The easiest way for you to do it now is with your smartphone, and you will type menti.com, and once we start the poll, we're going to give you the code that you need to use and enter in the bar that you can see on the slide and then submit your response. So remember, we use Mentimeter because it's a free tool that can have a large number of audience participating, and it does not collect any personal information, and you do not have to download any apps or register in order to vote using this tool. So this is why we're using it, and we always recommend that if you want to integrate some interaction in your sessions, you can use this tool as is anonymous and will protect your students' information. And in this case, it's protecting your information and all your answers are anonymous. So we are going to go to the next slide, and we have just one poll, as I was saying, and is why did you join the broadcast today? You are familiar with this question if you have joined our broadcasts in the past. We always want to know. And we have different options, and you can select as many as you want. Access PD for ESL, Access PD for world languages, ask a question about LinguaFolio, and that's the most important thing that you can do during the cafes. Once we finish with our panelists, you will have that option to ask as many questions as you want and as you have, since you are starting this process with LinguaFolio, or also sharing what you are doing during your implementation. We also have connect with other educators earn 1 contact hour for license renewal, and gather some information for others. If you are a lead teacher or an administrator, a coordinator, DLI, or ESL or languages coordinator, and you want to share this with other colleagues in your buildings. And also learn about new resources. So we are going to go to menti.com, and we can click, if you click and Marie in the code, and see that you have added to the chat. So once you enter menti.com, you will have to enter the code 109813 and you will see all the options and select as many as apply to you. So we click on the code. You should be able to see it. And Marie, you can click and see. See, we have 16 participants have submitted their responses. We have 25 participants now. So if you still are trying to find the app, remember you can use your computer, another tab, or in your smartphone and type menti.com and enter the number. You can also copy it from the chat. It's 1098136 and select the different options. I see a lot of participants today. They want to earn 1 contact hour for license renewal. Remember that you will receive a certificate via email with this contact hour, and you need to submit that certificate to your school district so they give you the CEUs that you require. And then another option we have, 20% learn about new resources. And it's great because I know our panelists are going to share how they're using LinguaFolio, and also maybe they mention some of the digital tools they might be using as they are integrating LinguaFolio into their instruction. And then we have 18%, and I'm just making a little bit of time. So if you have struggled accessing menti.com, then you can enter your answer. And then 18%, we have gathered information to share with others. So if you are a coordinator or lead teacher, you don't have students, you're not in the classroom, virtually or in person, but you want to have this information so you can share with your teams. So we welcome you. And then we have the next option, connect with other educators. And then we have a field saying, ask a question about LinguaFolio. So once we have our panelists, we hope that we have a lot of questions and these percentage grows a little bit. So I think we're going to continue. We have, I see 18 people have participated. I guess the system is giving me panelists number, and that's what I have, 27, I think. So I think we can continue, and we see 20%. Yes, 18 attendees have submitted their response. So thank you for participating. This information, I know sometimes we ask the same question. That is because this data gives us a lot of information in preparation for future broadcasts. So thank you, and let's continue. We're going to see who are our panelists for today. So you can see we have a great group today. We have educators that are world languages educators and others ESL, and all of them have some experience implementing LinguaFolio. And they are all from across North Carolina, different areas of the state. We see Rive, Bostwick, I'm just gonna kill me, Bostwick. I need a ESL teacher today for this last name. She's from Newton, Carver City, and she is a Japanese teacher and instructional leader for the NC Virtual Public Schools. And we have Sarah Putin, another Japanese teacher, conversation coach, and instructional leader for NCVPS. And if we continue with our world languages educators, we have Katerina Decker, Russian teacher and instructional leader for NCVPS, and Katarina Smith, German DLI teacher in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. And we have our rock stars from ESL. Rive, she's also an ESL teacher, and Betsy Burton, who has joined as well. She is an ESL teacher in Caldwell County Schools, and something happened with Anthony. He's Anthony, I don't see his description, but he's Anthony Nesbitt, ESL teacher in Craven County. Maybe it's hiding, but okay, so anything else you want to share about this panel, Anne-Marie? We are really excited that they're going to share what they're doing with LinguaFolio and the different questions that we have prepared for today.
That sounds good. Just know, like Sally said, that all of our panelists come from very different backgrounds. You see different languages represented here: ESL, Japanese, Russian, German, all of that. And we're looking forward to hearing from our panelists today and getting their feedback on some of the questions that we posed about setting goals and so forth with LinguaFolio and how they do that in their classrooms. And it looks like Anthony's missing information just came up because it was on animation on our slide. So there you go. Now our slide is complete. So let's go ahead and chat. Our first topic is setting goals with LinguaFolio. And so we have two basic questions that we've asked our panelists to think about and to share about. The first one is, how do you set goals with your students? Do you do that as a class, for your daily lessons or units, etc., as part of your work with LinguaFolio? And then also, and just as importantly, how much freedom do you give students in choosing language goals? Do you guide them, limit their choices or options, or encourage them to set their own goals? So we're going to turn it over to our panelists now. And I think all of you can just jump in. If you want to go in the order you were on the slides before, that's fine too. But I'd encourage you just to jump in and share who you are real quickly, which of our panelists, and also which teaching environments you're going to be talking about. So do you teach with elementary, middle, or high school students? And maybe which language that you're teaching, just so we'll know.
Okay, this is Reve Bostwick. Since I was first on the slide, I'll go first. I'm not the most important, so please don't think that. I think it's important. Oh, I'm sorry. My teaching environment would be, I'll talk first about Japanese, teaching Japanese to high school students through NCVPS. So what I think is important is to make sure all students do a self-assessment. And then that way, once they have assessed themselves on the benchmark indicators, that will help guide them as to what kind of goal they would like to form. I don't usually do that on a daily lesson basis. And the reason for that is because I would never be able to keep up. And with such a wide variety of goals based on the content, I think that we would feel like we weren't getting anywhere. So we do have our students evaluate themselves and set goals. And then after that, we would go back and revisit maybe once a month and determine whether or not they had made any growth towards achieving those goals. Maybe they want to change their goals and have entirely new goals. You could do it with more frequency than monthly, determine whether or not students had met those daily goals. But I think then that way, if you do it that way, then you would want to make sure you tailor your lessons around those daily type goals that they have set for themselves. Typically, what I would do is I will look at what the goals are for the students. For our online program, our content is already prescripted, so there's not a lot of freedom there. But in the ESL environment, in my face-to-face classroom, I am able to then see, okay, what goal does this one student have, and how can I help him or her achieve that goal? And so I can give students different response opportunities. If they wanted to do more interactive speaking, I can work on providing opportunities for them to show and provide evidence that they can achieve those goals. If it's a student who wants to do more writing, I can work on incorporating more activities that involve writing. So it wouldn't be on a daily type basis for each individual student, but throughout the course of the weeks and months, we do try to incorporate all of those different goals for students. I'll let someone else talk now.
Hi, everyone. This is Sarah Booten. I am a Japanese teacher, instructional leader, and Japanese conversation coach with NC Virtual. And I want to thank everyone for being here to share experiences with everyone, and we can learn from each other, hopefully. So I work directly with Reve in the Japanese department, and we have a lot of fun working with students. And a lot of my answers are probably going to echo Reve's in that our goals are set with the students sort of through LinguaFolio. So we have students use the LinguaFolio too as a way, the tool as a way for them to self-assess and decide what they will be working on, and then they can see their progress as they go on and finish their lessons. I tell my students, especially because I work with level 1 students in a level 4 language where students have to spend a lot more time doing things related to learning the language. So because Japanese is logographic, they're going to have some more challenges because they have to learn the writing system and get comfortable with the different way of putting the language together. So I tell them that learning a language is like depositing coins in a piggy bank. And so sometimes you're starting off and you're just putting in a few cents and it looks like, goodness, there's not really much progress here and I'm not really making any progress. But as you go on and you continue to study, you're adding in more and more change every day. And the example I also use with my students is that my dad, when I was a kid, had this giant jar of from those polar water, the big water dispensers, and he had change that he would put in them. And over the course of many, many years, that jug eventually became chock full of coins. So I like to tell them that piggy bank analogy because it encourages them, especially when they feel like maybe they're not making much progress. But the LinguaFolio tool is a lot like looking at that jug of polar water where they can see, okay, I am putting in these coins and hey, maybe I couldn't do this before, but now that I finished this lesson, I can do this statement. So they can check that off and feel that sense of accomplishment. So they're able to use the tool as a way of seeing how much progress that they're making. And I think that helps with their motivation for sure. Now, in terms of how much freedom do we give, again, I'm going to echo Reve's sentiment in that our lessons at NC Virtual are already established, but I like that we can use the LinguaFolio tool to guide them and show them how much progress that they're making. So it's been a lot of fun. I really encourage students to keep using the LinguaFolio tool and monitor their progress. And I think it's a great way to keep them encouraged and keep them working along in their courses, especially if maybe they don't see the progress that they make every day. I want to remind them that they are making great progress every single time. Putting that one coin into the piggy bank is going to help them in the long run.
Hello, my name is Katarina Decker. I also teach with NC Virtual, and I am a Russian teacher and instructional leader. I have been with NC Virtual for 12 years, and I want to share a few successes with using LinguaFolio and touch on some of the questions that you see here on the slide. So first of all, before I teach Russian 1 and Russian 2, and our students are beginning learners. Most of them do not have any experience in Russian, and they are novice students. And some of them have never taken any foreign languages, so they do not have much experience in how to learn language. And over the years, I have taught Russian with NC Virtual for 12 years. I had many conversations with students, especially during the semester and when they come to Russian 2. And some students say, you know, I read what we have in the class, I repeat, I review, and then sometimes I try to remember and I can't seem to remember. I can't seem to say what we were learning. I know what we were learning about. And many of these conversations helped me realize that many of our students lack skills how to work with the language. So before they set goals and what they want to do with the language at the beginning of the semester, I always take time and have students go through how do I learn checklist and check some of the items they are already doing, and some of them maybe have never done because they have never studied language. And I challenge them to select few items and try to work on those or implement some of those techniques while they are working during the semester, something they would have never thought about doing, because most of our students, they use the skills that they developed in other classes and they transfer those skills to foreign language. For example, they read for the most part, right? They write. And some of the special skills in like working with new vocabulary, writing, developing pronunciations. So some of those skills are not there. So I challenge them to take some of the, set the goals, and they post to the discussion forum, and they and it helps them to on those specific techniques they can use while working on the lessons. When it comes to setting the goals, our classes are already set up just like in Japanese, and they have modules, and they pretty much go through the modules. It's set up for them what they will be doing, what vocabulary they will be working on, what topics, what are the speaking activities. So they really do not have much choice. However, we help them when we always have students who may be heritage speakers so it's always this big bouquet with students of different skills. So when we are providing feedback, we always try to help students see where they are and how they are doing on the certain assignment. Or writing. So we always try to help them reach those goals by providing more specific feedback, providing additional resources, and this definitely helps students to gain some of that confidence when they are working on the goals that we set for them in the modules.
Hi, this is Anthony Nesbitt. I'm an ESL teacher with Craven County Schools, and I teach students. I have in the past taught K-12. This year, I have students who are kindergarten through 8th graders, and I have students that are at all different levels of language proficiency. And one of the things I do at the beginning of the year is I meet with all the students. It's usually our first class, and we come together to decide on what our broad goals are. And those are based specifically on the previous year's access scores. And it's sort of a way the students can self-assess, and they usually create a personal statement linked to a particular domain that they would like to improve or make a gain or make progress in. And I keep a record of that, and I use these to guide the instructional units that I create. And it's a way of differentiating activities with different students. For example, I might plan an activity where with one student who I know that he may have said his goal was to improve his speaking. He may have an activity where he uses something like Flipgrid, and with other students, I may do a writing activity with them. With the upper elementary students, middle school students, I've given them some freedom to choose their own goals, and it's been a very interesting way to kind of come together and agree on some different things. Like they're usually linked to the WIDA can-do statements, and the charts. And for some of the younger students, they don't quite understand the can do. We have to take some time to explain the things that they're working on. But with one student this year, I had a student whose goal was to read the novel Twilight. And we actually were able to come up with we just came together and just collected some things from the can do statements, can do charts, and some things from Twilight. And we came up with a goal, and that has really served to motivate the student. So the student doesn't feel like I'm just learning vocabulary, but they really feel like they're improving and making progress in the novel. And again, it's when we come back, I remind them of their goals, and it's a way to check in and just keep them motivated.
Hello, I'm Katrina Smith. I teach fifth grade German immersion in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, and I have previously used LinguaFolio face-to-face with third graders and fifth graders. And for the third graders, the goal setting was more as a class based on our unit. And for my fifth graders, it was more of a motivation, such as Anthony said, finding something that they wanted to connect with, that would make them want to, branch out and really experience the language, but using those can-do statements to help them be successful. So I did not give the third graders as much freedom in choosing their goals as I did the fifth graders. I would offer guidance to the fifth graders as they chose their goals, and I would limit them if they were overambitious, trying to do a little bit too much or take on too much at once. But encouraging them to set their own goals was a big motivation, because I teach language immersion. And so in kindergarten through second grade, the children don't even think about using the language. They just kind of absorb it as sponges, and they just want to do it. And the older they get in the upper middle, elementary and middle school level, they start to sometimes resist or not want to talk the language. They think they're too cool or whatever. So this kind of brings it back in for them when they have choice in setting their goals and seeing that it is beneficial to them and their language production when they have buy-in. So that is really why I was wanting to use LinguaFolio, to get my fifth graders a little bit more motivated and come back to that love of the language that they started to lose in third grade and on. So that is my experience.
Betsy, are you still able to come on and speak? I don't think we'd heard from you yet, right?
That's right. And actually, Betsy just solved her tech problem. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute her so that she can share about these questions from her classroom.
Can you
Betsy?
hear me? I don't know if you can hear me.
Yep,
Yeah.
loud and clear.
Right, this is on an old computer. I don't understand the other one. So anyway, I was really enjoying listening to what they were saying about setting goals. But I figured that since LinguaFolio is already tied to WIDA standards, that in the beginning of the year, as I just set my units and my topics based around my topics, and I set my goals, I'm pretty much setting WIDA standard goals depending upon proficiency levels. Then when I'm ready to move into LinguaFolio later, it sort of ties in. But as we get into LinguaFolio more, and the students become interested in doing different things, LinguaFolio sort of guides differentiation. And the students begin to differentiate more and more as they begin to become engaged with LinguaFolio. They just begin thinking about what they want to do in terms of LinguaFolio. And then they start figuring out how can they use the things that they've done and where do they want to go. And of course, this is kind of a process. But eventually, as they set more and more, as they set their own goals, differentiation occurs more and more, and my goals become driven by what they are wanting to do and where they want to go. So although I still have my different topics, I begin to look at the topics in a different way as to how can we use the topics and what our interaction in class and where we want to go. How can we use that to foster or facilitate their accomplishing their own goals? So it just gradually changes throughout the year, more from my setting goals to their having more and more of a hand in setting goals. And that works at different, it works to different degrees with different students. That's just kind of an overview of what I do. I can't give you an example of a topic right now that we did that with, but I mean, we've done it with all sorts of different domains and, with different domains and different topics and different areas in language of math, language of science, just depending upon what topics we were engaged in and where they wanted to go with their LinguaFolio. So I'm not sure I can analyze exactly where things start and stop, but it just evolves. Now, did you want me to talk about the freedom I give the students in choosing the language goals and the same?
Sure, yes.
Okay. Well, at first I guide them, depending upon where I think they are. And that's appropriate at first because they're not really familiar with the way the goals are set up, and they aren't really familiar with thinking about how they want to reflect and how they want to analyze. And it's all sort of they do that in class in different units, but they haven't done it for themselves individually the way they do when they start with LinguaFolio. So at first I guide them, but as they become more engaged and begin to decide what they want to do, I try to do more of a reflection analysis kind of thing. Like if they decide they want to choose a goal that I know is really too hard for them, then we'll have a discussion, maybe the whole class or maybe a small group, but we'll have a discussion about, well, if you want to do this, what kinds of things do you have to show that you know in order to do this? What are the small incremental things you have to show? And then because my kids are kind of lazy, they think, well, they don't really want to do this hard thing that much. So we decide on the different parts of it that they can do so that they eventually get to that point and it's not such a huge project. So they kind of start by working with me and then working with each other to determine what goals are really appropriate, what can they do and feel good about right now. And that's the way we sort of tease out the most appropriate goals for them to do. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody doesn't bite off more than they can chew sometimes, but I mean, that's part of the learning process too. So I don't always discourage that. If somebody really has a heart set on doing something, I let them go for it and decide how well they think they did.
This is Anthony. Can I add to that point also? I think for newcomers, recently arrived English learners, I think we as teachers need to really guide them.
Oh, yeah.
At least with my students, I really try to guide them to setting goals because they can feel with so much that's happening and so much new input that they are not feeling successful anywhere because it's just so much they're expected to do. But if we set goals that are attainable, that are reachable, for example, making it to level 2, that's your goal. And if we can work with other teachers in our building, other content teachers to have them set those goals and work on those goals as well, I think that can give our recently arrived, our newcomers the sense that they are making progress and that they're not, and they're still learning, even though, to reach what is expected at grade level, it's not there yet, but they have that success, and they have that. I think that's very important.
Yes, I agree.
This is Katarina Decker, and I also want to add here that we start our modules with I can statements. So students are prepared before they start working on the module, what they have to, what they should be able to do at the end of the module. So we set goals for them, but then I like to have a little discussion forum at the end, because our classes are online and we have these asynchronous discussion forums where I ask students after they completed the module to reflect. Did they reach the goals we set for them? Can they name the objects? Can they ask and answer questions? So it is because our students are high school students, they're easily able to analyze and reflect on what they can do. They get very excited if they can tell, yeah, I can easily do all these goals. And I ask them, is there anything additional you think you would like to do? So they can go through the can do statements and they can pick some additional, and they sort of add to the goals that we set for them. But I feel like this piece of reflection, students would skip this and they would not think about it. But we just ask them to pause and think and reflect, and they enjoy that. They really enjoy, because it helps to build that confidence, and then being able like, oh yeah, I can do all of these items after what we've done in this module. And that really helps them to help them go forward with confidence and add more to the goals that we set for them.
Now, it sounds like there's a lot to share here, and I hear a lot of people talking about the gradual release of responsibility when it talks to choosing goals. So first, I do as a teacher, and then we do as a group, and then you do as a student, so that they learn to set their own goals and they get more freedom with that as they go.
Yes, I think that's very important, Anne Marie. And I do like Katja's reflection on whether or not they have accomplished those I can statements. And we do like to do that when we teach in our face-to-face environment. So I think that's excellent that you do it in the online environment as well. And in terms of giving them choices and freedom in terms of setting their language goals, I like to give them as much freedom as I can. I want them to find something that motivates them and gets them excited about learning the language. And the only way I limit it is if it is something that they already can do. If they can already do it, there is no sense that should be their goal. So that would be the only limit. If they set their goal too high, then I would just like to do something similar to what Anthony said, and that would be to kind of pull out something maybe from that goal to give them an interim stepping stone to make it to their ultimate goal, because I don't want to take away their ultimate goal from them. I want them to keep that, but offer them also a pathway to get to that goal as well.
I've just noticed our time, so I think we're going to move on to our next slide, where we're talking about choosing can-do statements, which is probably just a continuation of our setting goals conversation. But let's jump into these questions. There are only 3 we have posted. How do you choose can-do statements when using LinguaFolio? What do you share with students about how to choose artifacts as evidence for a can-do statement in LinguaFolio? And what do you do if a student chooses an artifact that does not match the can-do statement? So once again, I'll invite our panelists to jump in and answer those questions.
Well, am I unmuted?
Yes, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, choosing the can-do statements is sort of what we were just talking about, as you said. But as far as choosing artifacts, that does become kind of tricky sometimes. Now, like Anthony said, with the newcomers, I mean, it's a lot more guided, a lot more of me with my input. And there's really a good reason for that as they become more proficient. However, I like to have artifact partners where they're partnered with somebody that they feel good about, that they've worked with, and let them peruse the different things they've done and choose artifacts that might match a goal, or let them plan something they think they could do that would be something that would be a good artifact for a goal. And I'll let them have a lot to say about that, but this is not like that's something new, because we are used to, by that time, we're used to looking at the things we've done and saying, well, what does this show? Why does this show this? What does this show you can do? What would you tell someone else about what you can do with this thing you've created? Because we're always, in all of our units, they're creating different things. And so they're used to that kind of questioning, that kind of thinking. So then when they are choosing their artifacts, they sort of apply that to what they're chosen, and they talk about that with each other. And I have even in the past, if one seems to be really confusing for them, made a very simple rubric that they can look at and they can use with each other to look at an artifact and see if that's a good one for a particular can-do statement. And if they do finally choose one that just doesn't match it at all, but they think it does, and they can talk to me or tell me why they think it does, then I generally end up going with their reasoning, because I figure it's better for them to make a mistake and be engaged and excited than it is for me to shoot them down. So I just keep that in mind as we do other things, trying to help build their ability to analyze and reflect, so that they come up with more accurate, appropriate things that they choose.
This is Anthony. I agree with Betsy. I think what I do with my can-do statements, they're tied to the language objectives, and they're kind of built in with the assessment or feedback component of the instructional lesson. And I do generally let students choose their own artifacts, and there is that discussion piece that goes with it. And it's like Betsy said, if they can convince you that an artifact matches the can-do statement, then definitely they go for it. I mean, they're very motivated to do that. So that's my philosophy.
I would like to agree with Anthony and Betsy that yes, I want to listen to their reasoning for the artifact that they chose, and if they can defend it and it can match. I would say that when I started out with my third graders in picking out the artifacts, I would actually help scaffold, say whatever the goal was. I would say these are the activities that we did that might have been for that goal. So that way they weren't grasping to try to pick out an artifact. Then they just looked at those items and then picked one to fit that can-do statement. But as they learned how the process worked, then I would lean over and let them have control of picking their own artifacts. But in the beginning, because choosing an artifact was so difficult, I would remind them which items could fit that goal, and then they had the choice within those items. And also my can-do statements came also tied to the language targets, and with the unit of study that I was pursuing in the German language at that time.
So if I may shift the conversation into the online world a bit, how we choose our can-do statements, at least for the Japanese department and probably a lot of the languages we teach at NC Virtual, our can-do statements are kind of already there for us in LinguaFolio. And I want to take a minute to brag on Reve, actually, because she recently created a really user-friendly Google form that is going to allow the students to fill in where they are at the can-do statements, just using this really simple Google form. And I love that because it takes away some of the barriers that students might have to using a tool like LinguaFolio in an online setting. So just thank you, Reve, for making that happen. It's a great tool. I'm really excited about using it this semester. And then as far as choosing artifacts, we let students choose what they want, but personally, I tell students not to necessarily look for the artifact, the submission that earned you a high grade. You want to look at what you did and also think about what you learned from it. And I love that this provides an opportunity for students to go back and especially look at their feedback in addition to what they did before, because they can go back, maybe get a refresher on some of the remediation or some of the points where maybe they made a mistake, which is totally okay. And they can revisit where they need to improve upon, but also see now at this current point in time, hey, I've made this much improvement since I started this lesson. So for me, I absolutely love having that reflection in it. And if the student chooses an artifact that doesn't really match the can-do statements, I think there's a lot of flexibility in them. Students are able to see, okay, this is the can-do statement, and I feel that I've made this progress and this is what I'm using. As long as they're kind of able to justify this is what they're thinking, I'm okay with that. But if there's really something out of alignment, I can always go back and ask the student for clarification or maybe help guide the student to find another piece that's really helpful for them to demonstrate that they've met that statement. One of the things that I just love so much about the LinguaFolio too is that it's not just them doing the self-reflection, but by looking for those artifacts, they can back up their progress. And especially with this newer generation, Gen Z or the Zoomers, it seems like a lot of them are maybe not necessarily looking to go the more traditional route of going into a four-year college. Some of them might be doing more trades or going into the workforce right away after school. So that way they can take this LinguaFolio with them and say, I've studied Russian for 2 years and this is what I'm able to do. And they can take those artifacts and back them up. And that's going to make the employer hopefully take a second look at them as they're out looking for jobs.
What all the panels have said so far, I agree with absolutely everything they've said, and I don't have any other tricks for choosing artifacts and guiding students other than what's already been said. When it comes to choosing the can-do statements, I think it's important for us to remember that we don't have to give the whole entire gamut of LinguaFolio for students to go through and self-assess and, to evaluate how they've done on interpretive, interpersonal, and reading and writing and speaking. And it gets a little bit overwhelming if we try to have them go through everything at once. So I think it's okay if we give it to them in parts and let them self-assess, let them make their goals in one particular area, and do something else on a different day, just so that it's not so overwhelming. And I believe some others have also mentioned about our newcomer students, how it's a lot for them to have to self-assess and set goals when it takes you the whole class period to explain, what is it even that we're doing here if you don't speak that person's native language. So think about chunking it, think about using other resources like images and examples to help your students understand what would that goal look like if I'm able to meet that. What does that even look like? So I think having those examples there to help your students see what it is that you are asking them to look at in the LinguaFolio is going to be helpful.
I'm also looking across our chat to see what questions are coming up. There's a lot of thank yous to our panelists coming up. And one question for Reve, would you consider sharing the Google form or your guidelines for how you created it that you spoke about?
If you can give me just a few moments to set it up so it's made as to make a copy for you, I can get that for you, yes.
Great. And if you send that to me, I will post that, in fact, with our archive materials from this broadcast so that everyone can access it. I'm also looking for any other questions in the chat. So if you have anything you want to ask our panelists, whether it's something we've already talked about and you want to know a little bit more, or you have a different question, now's the time to put it in the chat so we can share it. Seems like everyone's suddenly gone quiet. So to our panelists, before we close out today, is there any one last bit of advice you'd like to give on setting goals or choosing can-do statements with LinguaFolio? Maybe think of it as a tweet, something short and sweet.
This is Anthony. I would just echo to keep the can-do statements limited to the lesson, and not try to give them all out at once.
Yes, I agree with that. This is Betsy. I have let them guide what they want to do and take off with it when they were really into it, and they usually are kids who seem ready to do it when they do that. But for other groups, I also have gone from the lesson can-dos to LinguaFolio. So it's not always the same. It's not a cookie cutter recipe. But I would say that even if you do it and you think you made a terrible mess of it, it's still worth doing, because there's not really anything else that I've found that gets kids to want to reflect and analyze their work and think about what they do the way LinguaFolio does. And I think that's probably one of the most valuable things that we can build or facilitate for our learners, because that quality goes beyond LinguaFolio and the language classroom.
I would tell educators to remind students to aim high, maybe not too high that they get frustrated, but aim high, because LinguaFolio is all about growth, and obviously they'll need to bring the growth mindset. Remember that where they are right now in the language is not where they'll stay forever. As they invest the time and effort into it, their language abilities will grow. And also to have fun with this. Usually students are taking our languages because they're interested in the culture and they want to learn more about it. So remember to have fun with it and keep that growth mindset.
I also want to add that when we explain to students that this not only helps them to go through this class, but also it can help them in future. They can show what they have learned and what they have done in the class and what they can do with their language. It can help them in certain job situations or going to college. Students really get excited. And even involving parents does help. Like, for example, we are getting ready for our new semester. Yesterday, I had conversation with student and parent, and the parent was very interested in how we teach and what this is based on and who designed it. And I explained that how our courses were designed, and then we use LinguaFolio, and if this is a system accepted all over in US and compares to the system in Europe. Parent was very excited, and that really helps students have this serious attitude to our classes and be very willing to use LinguaFolio while they are working in class.
And I like to use LinguaFolio in two ways. One would be more like at the lesson level, And then another is overall growth in meeting towards that next proficiency level. So I think we have to look at it both ways, because you can see whether or not the student met the goals for that day, and he or she can view that information for himself or herself. But then also too, are they meeting that progress towards becoming more proficient in the language? And just like Sarah had mentioned before, is that daily progress is really hard to see. When they can check off their individual daily can-do statement that they did for the lesson, then yeah, they can see that part. But then that overall growth on that proficiency map for them, are they making progress there? So when they can see it both places, I think they get very excited. And both of those ways, I believe, are motivators for the students to continue learning.
All right, well, I think we've heard from all of our panelists here in the finale. If there's someone who still wants to speak, now's your chance. Okay, well, hearing quiet and noting our time, we're going to go ahead and roll forward. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing your perspective on LinguaFolio and how you, as a teacher, answer these questions about setting goals and choosing can-do statements with your students. It's always valuable to hear how another teacher does things. And we've got several comments in the chat box about how helpful it was to hear your tips and suggestions and just the way you go about approaching that. One thing we're going to try to do, we always, of course, post the archives with these broadcasts, but we will try to grab the transcript as well and see if we can post that, because some of you said you'd like to see some of these ideas and just sort of read through them again, as well as maybe listen to them again as part of your thinking and your reflecting on what you learned here today. So we will try to do that for you. All right, just a reminder too, as we close out today, that you can always access LinguaFolio classroom materials. Most of you are very familiar with our LinguaFolio website. You see the bit.ly link up there, bit.ly/nclfhome. And remember, all of our resources for world languages and English as a second language are posted here, usually as PDF and Word documents. We also post the information you need if you want to do LinguaFolio online, or what we call LFO for NC. We have our own login with the University of Oregon, who manages LFO, and so that's always available to you as well. Also, don't forget, we have other professional development besides our LinguaFolio cafes. We have the Canvas course, that's the Introduction to LinguaFolio, that's been available since July of this year. So I know some of you are featured, by the way, in the videos that is in that course. And some of you are enrolled. I see some familiar names from our enrollment list currently. So that training is self-paced. You see there on the left, there's a whole little step-by-step how to enroll in that through the NESIS system that we have with Homebase. Or if you're outside the system or don't want to do it self-paced, but want to do it with like a PLC or some group, you can always go to the Canvas Commons, and there's instructions on that on the right-hand side, and download it and set it up in your own instance of Canvas and run the course how you would like. Once again, we just want to remind you, these are our LinguaFolio cafes, and the archives for this will be posted within a week of the broadcast on our LinguaFolio Cafe page on the website. So look for that. The October 13th archives are already there. And I will tell you, sometimes we get things posted a little more quickly than 1 week later. So look for that soon. And finally, we hope you'll join us on March 9th, when we're going to be talking with panelists about collecting evidence with LinguaFolio and how that works for them and their students. The link for that, by the way, to register for that broadcast is also on the LinguaFolio Cafe page, already set up to go. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, many thanks for all of our panelists sharing today. I know we were linked up literally across the state with many people getting a chance to talk, but I think that really helped us think about LinguaFolio from very different perspectives, different languages, different language programs, and different age levels of students. Notice that Sally has also put in the direct link to our LinguaFolio Cafe's page on the website. So if you want to go there right now and bookmark that or look at the materials that are there, you can quite easily. That's in the chat box for you. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I'll go ahead and stop recording, but we will still be here if you have additional questions or comments that you want to share.